I'm Jason Odegaard, licensed marriage and family therapist, coming to you today to talk to you about your marriages, in particularly to give you some tips and some insights of how to avoid any major pitfalls in your relationship that can create problems, discord, disconnection, and hopefully preventing divorce as, the big one that we don't want to go there. So I want to give you guys some insights. First of all, I'll say this. A lot of research has been pointing to the fact that parents who have medically complex children often have a higher divorce rate. And some studies say that it's as high as 85%, while some other studies will say it's not much different than people who have kids who are medically healthy. However, given the Exstrophy community, I know that you guys have a lot to deal with on a regular basis. I know if you haven't seen any of my other videos, I have an 8-year-old son who also has bladder exstrophy. And I'm also married to a marriage and family therapist, so that kind of helps. And that doesn't mean I haven't faced some of the same challenges that you guys have faced as well. So I'm here to talk about marriage from the scientific perspective, to give you guys some information as well as some tips, ideas, and just things that will help kind of motivate you when it comes to your marriage, when it comes to your relationship with your children, just so that you have the best possible outcome and the happiest marriage despite the potential challenges. So first thing I'll say is that there are four major things that couples do when they face conflict that are the biggest predictors of divorce. Dr. John Gottman, who's the expert on couple therapy, he calls these the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is, in the book of Revelation from the Bible, that's, basically the end times, if you will. So these 4 things are basically predictors of the end times of your marriage. Now, having said that, we will also say that we all do these once in a while to some degree. Even the best marriage in the world will still fall victim to one or two of these 4 horsemen at some times. There are a couple of them that are more stereotypically things women do and some things that men do, but they're not exclusive. So let me run through those 4 things for you. The first one is criticism, which I'm sure we're all guilty of at some point. Criticism being that I'm going to attack you as a person versus making a complaint. So it's one thing for me to say, I'd really like it if you vacuum differently. It's another thing for me to say, you really suck at vacuuming. So that's a personal attack on that person's character. Consider the possible outcome. If I say you really suck at something versus I'd like you to do something differently, or can I give you an education on how to do it better or to do it my way, the person is going to be far less defensive if you present to them another option versus attacking them, right? So you can see how just from the get-go that can really send it in a good or a bad direction depending on how you approach the other person. So that's criticism. The second would be contempt. If you think of holding someone in contempt of court or things like this, really this is really the more awful type stuff. This is the insults. This is the name calling. This is even passive aggressive behavior such as eye rolling or just walking away. These are intentionally hurtful things that you might do or say to the other person. Contempt is incredibly powerful. We also know contempt and criticism are also linked to autoimmune struggles in your relationship. So if there's a culture of this going on in your relationship when it comes to conflict and fighting and things like this, I think it's about 15 times more likely that one of you will have huge medical issues going on, such as autoimmune disease, cancer, things like that. So it is also linked to shorter lifespan. So if you can avoid criticism and contempt, you'll have a healthier body and brain as well as a healthier marriage. So that's number 2. Number 3 is defensiveness, which is fairly self-explanatory. That's the meeting a criticism or a comment with another one with an excuse, right? You do this, well, I did that because you did that, right? So we need to be careful not to what we call cross-complain. I did this because you did that. But even just giving excuses for why we did those things. Sometimes I'll say from a male perspective, we like to explain because we want the other person to understand us. It's how we try to connect to our partner in a difficult moment. But I will say this, It's not helpful in the heat of the argument. It might be helpful the next day or in a couple of hours when things are calm, but defensiveness only creates more defensiveness and leads us in a path where we don't get to a place of resolution. So that's number 3. Number 4, this is 85% most common in men. It's called stonewalling. Now, stonewalling typically is, we would call it the silent treatment, little to no response, little to no eye contact, just basically shutting down. And 85% in men, like I said, the reason men do this is because they tend to get flooded more easily than women. Usually this happens when the heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute in the midst of an argument. So women often perceive this, if their partner is doing this to them, women often perceive this as a nonverbal passive-aggressive attack. In reality, it's not actually that at all. If you were to read the mind of a man while this is happening, he would probably be saying, don't make it worse, don't make her more mad, let's just keep it simple, work, I leave in 10 minutes, let's just ride this out, right? So he's really trying to de-escalate himself, he's trying to remain calm so that he doesn't explode or blow up, and just trying not to make the situation worse. At the same time, it does make things worse, right? Which is why it's one of the 4 horsemen. So there are antidotes to this, which I'll get into at a different time. But most importantly, to start, for you, I would consider, what is it that I do the most? What is it that my partner does the most, or that I perceive they do the most? Because obviously awareness is the first step towards change. So the more that we can catch that in ourselves, the better off you'll be. Okay, so oftentimes we say, instead of criticizing, complaining, being defensive, or stonewalling, the first and best thing you can do is create a culture of appreciation for your partner. So usually that looks like, instead of, I used the vacuuming example earlier, instead of you viewing them as vacuuming horribly, which may actually be true, build internally for yourself, build a culture of appreciation for your spouse. And maybe they are terrible at vacuuming, but what are the things that they're good at? What are the things that really help you appreciate them? What is it that they take off of your shoulders that relieves you so much pressure or time or energy? How do they complement you? How do they contribute to the marriage? So even just thinking things like that, if you did it a couple of times a day, you're more likely to view your partner more positively. So those are the 4 horsemen. I think that's an important thing for us to recognize in ourselves, to know what we typically do. Oftentimes, if we get into it a little deeper, we can look at the way our parents used to argue with each other. And oftentimes we inherit those traits, whether we want to or not, because the way we see our parents argue and resolve conflict is something we internalize as what everybody does, right? I've had plenty of clients over the years who say, well, I just thought it was normal to throw things. I thought it was normal to punch holes in walls. I thought every house had holes in every single room or doors that were broken. And that's just not true, right? So we assume that is normal, but that doesn't also make it healthy. So I'd encourage you guys to look at what you do or don't do, what you can do better, and really put forth some effort and have a conversation about it. I think that's one of the most important and helpful things you can do with your spouse, is to be able to have open and vulnerable communication to improve that and make things more healthy.